for me, that is the signal that, you know, you come in sometimes as the first. It is not easy to be first or to be the youngest to do a thing. But if you do it well, you do it in a way that leaves the door open wider for the next one to come behind you and to take it even further.
I don't got it all planned out, but you know, I just watch it all pan out, 'cause I know that you know, covered in this life until forever.
Welcome to the Cool Mom Code podcast.
Thank you, Boo. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. This has been a long time in the making. I am so excited to talk to you, and I have been for so long because honestly, like I said, I think that on social you come across as just like, you come across as very authentic, and you come across as very real, but also truthful. Like you're sharing your story in the most... This is the thing. I think people do share their stories in kind of like a Debbie Downer way sometimes. Woe is me. This is what's going on in my life. But you share your story in a way of like, hey, can y'all relate? Can y'all relate? It's always this question of like, this has happened to me, but can you relate? Like, it's almost like you want to know in the world that you're not the only one going through this. But I think in doing that, you show people that we're all going through it.
Yeah.
Why? How did that come about?
I don't know how else to be. I don't know how, it's so funny. The thought of not being authentic is so foreign to me. Like are people out here just walking around not being themselves? I literally don't have that superpower. I actually wish sometimes I did. I don't. I am just a transparent person, and I am an open book, and I am here for connection.
Have you always been that way?
Always, since I was a little kid. My mom used to call me little Barbara Wawa, like little Oprah, because I was always that person that was connecting with people on this deep level. No matter where I was at, people were telling me their whole life story. We'd be like holding hands and crying together and yes girling it. Like it was like, I just don't know another way to be. Truly, I wish I did have a different mode, because literally like the other day I was at the park with my kid and I wasn't feeling good and I was tired and I was cold and I was hungry and I kind of wanted to make it quick. But this mom, I randomly met this mom there and she sat next to me on the park bench and she told me her whole saga with her man and this and that.
Yes.
And next thing you know, I'm in it. We're in it. Like that's just the only MO I have. I am really wired for connection.
Yeah.
I really love people. I really love the truth. I really don't have time for small talk. I'm not skilled at that. I can have like a fun little party chat, but I really want to know who you are. And I want you to know who I am.
Yeah.
And I want to grow together and I want to learn together. I want to learn from you. I want to be seen, I want to be heard, and I want that exchange.
This is wild because I feel like this is exactly how I am.
Really?
Yes.
You have that sign on you, that invisible sign on your head that's like, tell me your whole life story.
1000%.
Yeah.
But I encourage it.
Yeah.
I'm like, girl, let's talk.
Yeah.
Like, let's get into it. I think that it's interesting though, because my husband says this to me all the time. He's like, he always says, give to me what you give to the world. Because I come home drained. I'm an extrovert in the world, and I do enjoy conversation and talking to people, and I feed off that. I love it. I love having like this community and talking and engaging. I get home, I'm so tired.
Yes.
I'm so drained.
Yes.
And so he thinks I'm an introvert at home and an extrovert in the streets.
I relate to that. Oh my God. If you ask my husband if I'm a social person, he would laugh. He would be like, absolutely not.
See?
And when we're out and I get kind of sometimes trapped in these deep conversations when sometimes I don't have the capacity, but I don't know how to turn it off, he can't tell when I want to be saved. He's literally looking at me and he's like, give me a sign. Like, you seem so into this. And I'm like, I am into this, but I also need help conserving my energy. Like, it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I really relate to that. I do think I'm an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert.
Something of the combination. Yeah.
Of that combination, because I do thrive in community, in conversation. I love connection when it's real and authentic.
Yeah, same.
And I always crave more of it, but it is hard. When you come home, you crash.
Yeah.
And
how do you protect it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still working on that part.
Same.
Because it's really, this is the Cool Mom podcast. This is, a place to talk about how hard it is to balance and manage your energy so that you're able to show up for your family
Right.
with as much energy, enthusiasm, and brightness as you do the rest of the world. And I often feel like when I come home, that's my sanctuary,
Yes.
where I just want to be like quiet. I want to be horizontal. I want to be snuggled, and I don't always have as much as I would like to give. And I do want to work on that.
I tell my husband, I'm like, I don't have to be on. Like, not saying that
Yeah.
anything I do in the world is inauthentic, right? But it's like still this like, I feel like in order to connect, you have to be a bright light, right? Like, you
Yeah.
have to feel like, like you're shining, right? And
Yeah,
so
you're open.
You're open. And so at home, I always tell him, I'm like, at home, I don't have to feel like I'm on. I can feel like I can just be this almost empty battery, and you won't judge me for it.
Yes.
You won't think twice about it.
Yes.
The silence is okay.
Yes.
It's like all these things. He's like, I don't care. He's like,
He wants more of
I
that.
want what you give to the world.
How do
So,
you manage that?
I don't know. I'm figuring it out. I think I'm figuring it out. I think now more than ever, we, as you and your husband, we've been together for a very long time. And I think now more than ever, I'm processing that, hey, he needs dedicated time.
Yes.
Whereas before I'd just be like, oh, you're fine. We're with each other. Like, you see me at night. We're
Right.
together. But what else do you need? We're sitting on the couch. I'm watching your program. Like,
Yeah.
But now I'm like, okay, you
Quality.
need dedicated quality.
Yeah,
time.
quality undistracted time.
Correct.
I have also had a very similar revelation with my husband in the last year or so since we had our baby.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, just being here is not enough.
Nope.
And I often find that it isn't until phones are up, baby's down, like we're looking at each other, the TV's not on, that all of a sudden I learn all these things about his day, what he's going through, how he's doing.
Right.
And I'm like, dang, am I missing all of that? Like,
Yes.
if I don't shut it all down
That's
and
right.
create this window, we could go without reconnecting with him. I
For
will
weeks.
tell you at any moment exactly what I'm feeling, exactly what I'm going through, who I'm mad at, why, what I need help with. Like, I am such a verbal person.
Oh, see, you're good.
Oh my God.
I'm not like that.
You will never have to question where I'm at. I will always tell you, but I need to be intentional about drawing it out of him.
That's
and
right.
creating the space where he feels comfortable to take up some space
Mm-hmm.
with his stuff and to share his heart with me. And in those moments of reconnection, I'm like, oh, it's like the best part. It's the best part of my day. Like, that man right there.
Yes.
That's my best friend.
Wow.
That is my dog.
Let's take it back to your best friend. Let's take
Yeah.
it back to your dog, your best friend, your partner in life.
Well, we've known each other since we were 12.
Okay.
We grew up in the same church. It is the cheesiest story you've ever heard. Our moms have literally been choir mates who stand next to each other in the church choir since we were kids. And to this
That's
day,
wild.
they stand next to each other in church every Sunday.
So your families grew up knowing each other.
Yeah. And I never thought that we would end up together. There are times I look at him, I'm like, are you Jonathan from church? Are you that guy from church? Like, he had these big dorky glasses.
No way.
He was not my type. I mean, but I always remember being drawn in by his smile and thinking, oh, he seems so nice. And he's going to make somebody a good husband one day. Like, he was always just solid, you know? He
Yeah.
went to the all boys prep school. He was going to be a doctor. He was that guy that sang Mama on Mother's Day. Remember that Boys to Men song?
Wouldn't we remember it? Yes.
Right?
I love that song.
Love that song. So
Yes.
every mom at church wanted their daughter to marry Jonathan Singletary.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
yes.
And my mom swears to God that her prayers, that her and his mother Sheila's prayers from the choir stand is what brought us together. But we ended up re-meeting as adults at around 27 in New
Okay.
York. I was already in New York. He came to New York for work. We met up just for drinks, just to be like, hey, what's up, whatever. And the rest is history.
No way.
Yeah, it's so cheesy.
That's
so
not
corny.
cheesy. That's actually so beautiful. It's so serendipitous, right? Like,
so crazy to think that you travel 3,000
whole world.
miles
That's
away
right.
from home to build this life for yourself, to meet someone who's totally different than anything you've seen before, and you end up back with somebody who's literally from your home.
That's wild.
It's really wild.
That's wild. So so that's why it's your person.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you
We're cut
have
from
so
the
many,
same cloth.
That's right. And
Yeah.
you share so many experiences. And listen, when your families are good, that's a big thing right there.
Yeah.
When your families are good. But let's talk about you being in New York, because
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on this, and I'm speeding through this.
I know,
because
you're
there's a
good.
lot that you have going on. There's a lot in your story. So I'm moving through this. But I think it's fascinating that you were the first Black woman right? Am I right in this? Editor-in-Chief at Teen Vogue?
Yeah, I was the youngest editor-in-chief of a Condé Nast title when I was appointed. And then I was also the first Black, why am I blanking on what it's called? I was
I'm
the
like, look, I don't
first
wanna
Black
get your title wrong.
editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. But I think because Teen Vogue is a younger brand,
Yeah.
I think the bigger thing is that because Condé Nast had been around for 107
Right.
plus years at the
Yes.
time. So, I mean, it's one of those things that I have mixed feelings about that as an accomplishment to tout, given that, the fact that we were still celebrating firsts
Yeah.
and onlys
Not even
in our lifetime,
Right.
Isn't something, it shows how much more progress we have to make. But I am proud. What I'm more proud of is that I was not the last. And, the editor-in-chief that followed me was an even younger Black woman.
Wow.
And the editor-in-chief who's there now is another young woman of color. And so for me, that is the
accomplishment.
signal
Yeah.
that, you come in sometimes as the first. It is not easy to be first or to be the youngest to do a thing. But if you do it well, you do it in a way that leaves the door open wider for the next one to come behind you and to take it even further.
Well, I think what was interesting too is that when you were in that position, you were very vocal. Like, you were still a face. People still knew who you were and your name. Whereas I think in many times in that position, it's a little bit more behind the scenes, where I feel like that wasn't the case for you.
That was all God.
Yeah.
I honestly look back at my whole journey and I just see God's hand, honestly, because all of that was out of my control. There's nothing that I did I didn't have a press team. It's not like I didn't even, this is a whole new world to me now on this side of being talent and all that stuff, which I don't even consider myself talent still. But I'm just saying the way that appointment was queued up.
Yeah, the way it evolved.
It was a divine appointment.
Yeah.
And when I think about the work that I'm doing today and all that has come since that appointment, I look back at that moment and I'm like, you set me up for this.
Yeah.
God, this was a setup for success.
Yes.
And not just for me, but for folks who look like me. It was an opportunity for people like me to see someone who looked like them in a position of influence at a place where we hadn't been represented before.
Right.
And luckily right now in this moment, it doesn't really feel as novel. It feels like we are in more places now, and that's a positive thing. But I will also say that just because it was very public, and I had this platform and I was able to, use that platform to make a change from the inside at Teen Vogue and really take it from a fashion and beauty title to more of a, political platform that made space for news and social justice and an embrace of sort of identity politics and all the things that matter to young people today.
Yeah.
In addition to the best bronzers and
It was a nice
pop
balance.
culture.
Yeah.
I was able to do that with the support of my team. I had an incredible team and they're still carrying out that mission. But I think on a personal level, that was a very hard season for me. So there was a dichotomy, on the outside, because of how public that appointment was, it looked so good to the world.
Yes.
I felt like it was like Black girls everywhere
Yes.
were cheering for me. I felt that love. I needed it.
Yes.
Because it was also professionally and personally the hardest time
But
of
why?
my career. I write about it in my book. It's nuanced. Being first to do something like that is not easy, and the setup was not ideal, despite the way it looked on the outside. There was a lot behind the scenes that was playing out politically in terms of dynamics. that made that appointment very challenging to navigate as a young leader and trying to find my footing and my voice and my leadership style, you know, in an industry where there aren't examples of that. There aren't examples of how a Black woman navigates a position like that successfully, and especially a young editor-in-chief. And given the setup that I had, which I talk about really honestly in my book. So I try not to like, it's hard to like synthesize it. So I'm not trying to like shamelessly plug my book, but it is like, I do think that for young people who are aspiring leaders, women who are in leadership positions, it's important that we tell our full stories, because so often like just the clipped headlines go out there and they tell a highlight reel version of the story. And there's always more to the story.
Well, I think that resonates in so many different layers, right? Like obviously career, motherhood, family, like so many marriage, so many different layers that resonates in this idea that, you know, it's not the highlight reel. It's not a highlight version. There's so many other things going on behind the scenes that one, not everyone shares, but two, should be discussed more. So people know that, listen, it's not just, oh, we have such a beautiful loving marriage and it came out of nowhere. It's so much that goes into that. And oh, my beautiful children are blah, 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 but there's so much more that goes into that day to day. My career is amazing, but there's so much more that goes into that behind the scenes. One thing I think that is fascinating is just that you took whatever that experience was and you did decide to write a book. You did decide to share your story and put it in print in a different way. And like you said, to probably shed light on the fact that there were so many things that were happening in your life to get to this point for other people who are aspiring to be very similar to you. What was that moment that you said, I'm going to put pen to paper on this one?
That book to me is my testimony. It's and it was put on my heart to write while I was living it. I was like, there must be only one reason why I'm going through all of this. It has to be for somebody else. And before I move on and embark on all these other ventures, which I always had in my heart as well, I had my sights set on what I was going to do in my editor afterlife. And I knew that actually going into being an editor, which is a thing I also wanted to share.
What was in your editor afterlife? What were you?
I knew.
What was that?
Well, it all starts with my mentor coming into the game. So I studied the career of my first boss, who I stalked down to get her to give me an opportunity just to even meet her, let alone to work with her. And that's its own kind of like Cinderella career story, the way that happened, because she literally plucked me out of obscurity and put me on set with Serena Williams as my first day in the business as an intern. I'm just like, I literally felt like the Black Elsie from, do you remember, from The Hills? Do you guys remember The Hills? But I studied Harriet Cole's career, who was this, you know, maven in the editorial world, trailblazed in her own right, and then flipped it into this multimedia career that allowed her to kind of take her purpose and her mission across multiple channels. And so essentially she was the original multi-hyphenate before multi-hyphenating was a thing, before there was a social media. And it was the first time in my life I was like, that is what I want to do. That is what I want to be. It was so crystal clear that I feel like I walked into my career with a long-term blueprint.
I love
like
that.
Magazines are going to come first, but it doesn't end there.
That's
it's not going to stop there.
That's where it begins.
It is where it begins. And I knew that what would come later are multiple books, television opportunities, brand extensions, and I wanted to get into television writing as well. Like there's so much more. There's so many ways that you can flip a career.
We see you dropping
like
those hints on social. We see you dropping all those.
Listen,
like, look, we see it.
But it's like I think it's important for us in our generation and the people who are coming underneath us, like the younger folks, to think about our careers in eras.
That's right.
Like we are not going to have the same career for our whole life. Those days are gone. You know, my mom retired from the same job after 44 years.
Wow.
And kudos to her. And in her era, that's the American dream.
That's right.
We did not inherit that American dream. That's not even a realistic dream to carry. But I think we need to go into our careers thinking about what lights me up? What feels like rooted in purpose? What is my zone of genius? What was I put here to do in a way that no one else can do it? And what opportunities are going to allow me to grow my superpowers and help me explore my gifts and build up the parts of me that I need to develop.
That's
like
right.
where are the best learning opportunities, and let yourself be guided by intuition. Like, I just think that is so important to say to young
interesting.
people, because right now, I mean, college doesn't mean what it used to. Companies are falling, systems are falling. How do you even determine what you want to do? So that's part of why I wrote that book, was to help just give a framework for how to even think about designing a career that you could love, and one that's multifaceted enough that you could continue evolving as you evolve,
Yeah.
you know, and not feeling stuck in one career identity.
I think it's interesting that you say to plan in eras, because there's multiple women that have come on the podcast who say, and one in particular, who said to plan in 10 years. 10-year gaps. So like every 10 years, your goal changes. Every 10 years. But it also, what it does is, in her explanation, it takes a little bit of the stress off of yourself. Because if you are planning for the next 6 months, like this year, I need to have a book written and a press tour, and then this, whatever, blah, blah, and I want to launch this product. And it almost seems overarchingly impossible. If you plan in the 10 years of like, okay, so by 10 years, I want to make sure that these things have been knocked off, then it gives you a little bit more time to achieve, and it feels less stressful.
That's interesting. I think everyone, that is even more of a planner's mindset than I have. I think I got like a download, like a divine download about a longer term picture of what I was here to do. And then, it didn't come with a timeline. So I was surprised along the way when things happened sooner than I thought, or slower than I thought. You know, that part is, I feel in some ways out of our control. I think about my life in smaller increments that I feel I can have a bit more control over. So I plan, if I plan at all, which I'm not a planner, I'm a Sagittarius, but I am methodical and I am intentional, and I like to think about my life in quarters, because I think with quarterly goals and objectives, they're more achievable.
Quarters like 25, 50, 75, 100? Or
No,
how do you mean?
like Q1, Q2,
Oh,
Q3,
of the year.
Q4. Yeah, like
Okay,
I go
okay.
into the year, like what do I want to accomplish in Q1? Because it really gives purpose to every single day.
Yeah, it does.
You know?
Yeah.
And also it allows you to create achievable goals, not these big lofty goals that often require, there are factors outside of your control, right? But what can you do in the next 3 months that will result in an outcome that you will be proud of?
Yes.
And so that's really how I try to think. Like even with birthFUND, I dreamed this up, and I gestated and I held on to it for a little while, and I did my whole process of doubting, and before I brought it to the world on my birthday in December. And then once I had that proof of concept and there was that positive momentum and that reinforcement from the world that this is something that could be well received, this is something that could really have a positive impact, I set a very clear timeline around my goal of getting this into the world by April, which was Black Maternal Health Week.
That's right.
So I worked against an incredibly aggressive set of deadlines that really exceeded the bandwidth of everybody involved, including myself. I am so tired right now, but we got it done.
But how do you put that pressure on yourself and on others to make that happen?
You have to have a clear vision and super strong conviction, enough that will keep you hyper focused on each goal, which leads to the next step and the next goal, but also so that you can motivate a team accordingly. It takes very clear vision and super strong conviction to convince people to get on board with something that isn't real yet, that to them, that they can't see the way you can see it. So you need to be able to convincingly talk about your vision and what you see, and just remember that it was given to you for a reason. And you are the one
That
who's
part.
here to carry it out. And everyone may not see it until it's real and it's manifested and it's out in the world. But it might be a lonely, isolating journey
Right.
between the time that you've been called to do something and the time that that call becomes a manifestation that everyone else can celebrate and recognize. You know what I mean?
Right, till it becomes fruition. into
Yeah.
fruition. Just also a really quick note. If you're loving this content, our podcast with all of our amazing guests, we love sharing their stories. It really is such a joy for us. Then you're going to love thecoolmom.co. Make sure to head over there. It is everything that you can think of lifestyle. So we have fashion, food, we have amazing interviews with a lot of other cool moms as well. So check out all of our Cool Mom Co features, shop our merch, do all the things. Check out thecoolmom.co. What did you have this idea going through your birth journey? Or was this
No.
something that you had thought about way before you even embarked on children?
No. Girl, if you asked me what a midwife was 3 years ago, I'd have been like, a what? If you asked me about maternal health, I'd have been like, no, nothing about it. Motherhood transformed my walk in this world, completely transformed my purpose, my perspective on so many things. I was not that girl who was thinking about babies, motherhood, being a wife, maternal health. Like, these were not my priorities. They
That's
were
right.
not on my radar at all. Like, in
Yeah.
fact, becoming a mom, becoming pregnant was so not my plan. It was so unplanned that it really threw me, and it took 9 months for me to even process
this was happening.
that this was happening, for me to accept that this was happening, and then layer on top of it all of the challenges that I had that I didn't anticipate. Like, I truly went into motherhood very naive, thinking, how hard can this be? Not at all anticipating that I would have any of these challenges that are associated with our maternal health crisis. You know, even though I heard about the maternal health crisis and I heard about these statistics, I think I was under the same misguided misconceptions that a lot of us carry, that like somehow we're
Removed from it.
our experience is going to be different. Maybe our privilege, our education, our network will somehow separate us or protect us from becoming a statistic. And that I can't stress enough that thinking is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
And it's going to take all of us thinking about this, working together to solve this, talking about this in order for anything to change. And it is moms like us
Right.
who are being impacted. It's moms who look like any of us.
Right.
It's not just a Black woman's problem. It's not just a poor woman's problem.
Right.
It's 50% of mothers in this country say that their births were traumatic.
Yeah, I read that.
That cannot be normalized. While it is the norm right now, and it is common, it is all too common, we can normalize that.
Was there something that happened in your birth journey that triggered this for you?
Yeah, the whole thing, the whole experience was so.
Why? What made it?
There were trying to find a doctor was demoralizing. I was shocked at how I was talked to by doctors. I was shocked by how rushed you are in the system. You feel like a number. You aren't taken seriously. Your questions aren't welcome. I was told by a doctor, you have exceeded my 2 to 3 question max, and I need to move on.
No, you did not.
I was absolutely told that by a doctor. That was the 8th doctor I met with. And at that moment, I said, no more. Now I recognize, I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, am I doing something wrong?
Am I asking too many questions? Am I too curious?
Which, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
no. You, especially as a mother in this climate, when we are in the midst of a surging maternal mortality crisis, no question should be off limits. This is a life or death matter when
That's
you're
right.
taking on the sacrifice of being a mother, and your care provider is there to provide care to you. And if
Right.
it doesn't feel like care, then you need to explore other options and you need to advocate for yourself. And I had to learn that as I went. I was really, like, honestly intimidated by the experiences that I was having with doctors, and not feeling well received and feeling scared
Yeah.
about what this was going to mean in terms of the outcome, my birth outcome. And So my default was to have a quote unquote normal hospital birth with a doctor, the way I had always seen it depicted, the way my mother and my grandmother did. But because of the experiences that I was having that were so negative, I sort of chose a different path to explore, which was midwifery care.
Yeah.
And it was a game changer, game changer, like night and day. I felt like I inherited this godmother who cared about me, who invested in me and my family, who nursed me back to health mentally and spiritually as well as physically. And I didn't meet my midwife, by the way, until my 3rd trimester. And I didn't decide I was going to have a home birth until 36 weeks, which is very late in the game. And that just goes to show how much unlearning I had to do about the normal way to give birth and some of these kind of misconceptions or these negative stereotypes that we've all been fed about midwives, if you've even heard about them.
Yeah.
Most people haven't even heard about them.
Right.
So I had a lot to overcome, but ultimately, oh my gosh, when I tell you going the midwifery route and having a home birth was the best decision I've ever made in my life. It was the most empowering thing I've ever experienced.
1000%. I had a midwife at the hospital though. So
You
we
did?
gave
That's
birth
the
at
dream.
UCLA and we did it with the midwives. The only thing that's different that I would say going back that I would have enjoyed more is that you don't know what midwife you're going to get on the day of, and it's a team
that's
of
tough.
midwives, so you're kind of circulating between like 3 different midwives, and you might connect more to one than the
Right.
other, and then you don't know who you're going to get on the day. And so going back in time, that would have been what you went through would have been something I would have enjoyed, I think, even more.
Yeah.
But the process of having a midwife and being able to labor, at my own pace, and that moment 3 times was fascinating. It was empowering. It really was.
Yeah.
But afterwards, did you experience any postpartum or anything like that after your...
No, I was so joyful.
Yes.
I had such a joyful birth. I had such an empowered birth. I truly, I don't even, that word empowered is so overused, but I can genuinely say that my birth was my home birth experience was the most empowered I've ever felt in my life.
Oh, I love that.
I was meditate. I'm not even
Yeah.
that girl, okay?
Yeah.
I don't meditate in real life, my
Yeah.
normal life.
Yeah.
But through labor, I was literally in a meditative state. I felt closer to God than ever. I was getting downloads. It was such an incredible experience. And afterwards, I was very nervous about things like, will I be able to connect with my baby? Because I thought, I'm so busy and I have this huge life. How am I going to make space to love on and care for a baby?
Yeah.
I was really not
Yeah.
quite there
Yeah.
mentally, but once I actually went through the experience and had my child, your life expands, your heart expands in ways that you can't even anticipate. And I'm blessed to say I didn't experience any kind of postpartum depression or anything like that. But I think I actually experienced what we don't talk about, which is sort of like a prepartum, pregnancy induced kind of anxiety or depression. I think it's not diagnosed, but when I look back and I think about the experiences that I was having, pregnancy can be really tough.
It can be.
It can be really humbling,
It can.
and it can really slow you down and take you off of your path in ways that it's a transition.
Well, listen, you're bringing in life to this world. Of course it's transition, right? You don't know what to expect. And, what people don't realize going into it, there is no handbook. There's no things, okay, this is chapter 1, this is chapter 2, then when this comes, this is chapter
That
3,
part.
and then it's
Or
different
how
for
your identity
everyone.
is going to shift.
Oh, 1000%.
And the grieving of your old self and your
Yes.
old life and the old ways.
The merging of the new.
The merging of the new. I wish there were more conversations like that
Yeah.
happening, but I think that they're happening more now. And I just feel really, I feel really compelled to do my part to help have those conversations, but also to help create solutions so that that kind of quality, holistic midwifery care that really changed the whole trajectory of my motherhood journey is accessible and available to more moms and families out there
I
who
love
want it
this.
but don't have access to it. And
I
that's
love the fact
basically
that
where
birthFUND
came
is
from.
created, right? birthFUND is here. It is here.
She's here.
It is announced. It is going to be a game changer.
Thank you.
Tell us more about what birthFUND is and how we can support.
Yeah, so birthFUND is a coalition of families who've come together to invest our own resources and to raise resources to make midwifery care specifically accessible to more families all across the country who want access to it but can't afford the out-of-pocket costs. Because unfortunately, something most of us don't realize is that in other high-income countries
That's right.
across the world, midwifery is the default model of birth care.
Of course.
And in those nations, they have much better birth outcomes than we do. And here in America, we actually are the deadliest place to give birth in the Western world, which, again, most of us
Blows
do
your
not
mind.
realize
Yeah.
that. So the primary difference is midwifery care. It's one of the main differences. And so it's one solution that we should be investing in. All of the research points to midwifery care can help prevent up to 80% of these maternal and infant deaths
Wow.
in this country. So for me, going through this as a first-time mom, the way that I made sense of my experience was to put on my journalist hat
Right.
and to really like investigate, interrogate, get into the research. And when I found out that 80% of these deaths in this country are preventable and that
Yeah.
there's known solutions like midwifery care, I'm like, okay, well, that gave me hope. That's
Right.
like, okay, well, we can do something about
That's
this.
right.
I know a lot of moms who are strategic businesswomen who make things happen.
That's right.
And if we knew to focus on this, we could get this done in our lifetime. So that became kind of my motivation. And I was like, I can call on some friends and we can put our money together. We can go to the corporate partners that we've been cultivating relationships with all these years.
That's right.
For all these other fun, glamorous
right.
things. And we can make real, meaningful
Change.
and impact happen together. And when I tell you, girl, everybody I called on said yes.
Wow.
It blew my mind. I'm telling you, I held on to this idea for probably 6 months before I moved on it because I doubted
That people would show up.
I doubted people would show up. I doubted that they would see the importance. But I was so truly, I could cry. I set my wish list. I thought, this is very ambitious. Let me prepare myself. But everybody I spoke to said yes, from Serena Williams to Aisha Curry to Carly Kloss, Ashley Graham.
Wow.
Everybody I asked, they said, I'm in, including men. John Legend, Alexis Ohanian, dads are a part of this movement. And so it's really, I want people to understand that while I have these big names associated with this is a movement that everybody can be a part of,
I love
which
this.
is why we opened up this round of funding to the public on Instagram, where we all are scrolling every
That's
day.
right.
It's like, just go ahead. If you have $5, $25, $100, $500, whatever you can give to this movement will go directly to these families. And so it's just, I think when there's so many problems in the world that feel unfixable, to have one where we can say we can fix this
Yes.
if we work together, I think it's motivating to people. I think it's refreshing. And I think for me, it's like a necessary light that helps me focus my good energy on something that feels productive and something that feels like a call to action that's actually going to move us forward, because there's a lot of darkness right
Yeah,
now,
there are.
and
There
there's a
is.
lot of stuff that's moving in the wrong direction.
Right.
So I think in times like these, we have to focus on what we can
But
change.
what if so obviously if we want to support, we can go to your page or go to birthFUND page
or
and we
any
can
of
donate.
any of our funders that I
In
just
our
named.
funders. But what if you're a family who is looking to have that support,
Yes.
who can't afford that midwifery care, and they're looking to try and participate as someone for you to support?
Yes.
How do they?
So in
become fun.
June, around Father's Day, you're hearing this first.
Look,
we are going to open
breaking
up
news.
applications to the public.
Okay.
And that is when we'll know exactly how much we've raised and exactly what our capacity to give is. So we'll have very specific kind of parameters around who can apply and what areas, what midwifery practices are participating across the country.
Right.
Right now we have 10.
Wow.
And we look to expand that with each round. So please look out for that update in June.
Father's Day.
Around Father's Day. But in the meantime, I'm receiving DMs, like birthFUND as well. Instagram is receiving DMs from people all over the country who are raising their hands and telling us their stories and asking for that kind of support. And we're absolutely filing those.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. you know what? I could talk to you for a whole nother damn hour.
Girl, I know
really
we
could.
just
I feel
we
like
just scratched the surface.
I mean, honestly, I want to.
But you covered a lot of ground. You're good.
Listen, I covered a lot
You're
of ground,
good.
but
I'm
not
usually
enough.
in that
Look,
spot.
Not enough. Exactly. But I am thankful that you came in today. I'm thankful that you're here. I'm thankful that you shared all the things that you're doing. We are fans of yours, but we also are
same.
supporters of yours. So keep on shining.
Thank you, boo.
Elaine,
You too.
keep on shining.
You too. I'm glad we did this. I feel like this was
me
just an
too.
excuse for us to hang out,
I
honestly.
mean, now
Yeah.
it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Now it's happening.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
We're locked in now.
For real. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the Cool Mom Code podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.